I think I see some nice awards in the film magazine in the background.
Oh, have they snuck in, have they? Yeah, a couple of.
How are your holidays?
Very good, very good. We had a rather wet time, but it was an quiet time as well. It seems that all of our families started to scarper, left, right, and centre out of Sydney and doing their own thing. So we were pretty quiet, but we didn't mind that at all.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. That's
Yeah,
fantastic. Good stuff. Well, good to have you back again one more time. Really excited to chat about Dead Poet Society.
yeah,
And we've sort of talked about it a few times in earlier episodes, but it's funny. I've always thought Jurassic Park was the film that inspired me to be who I am today, as a film director. But I think I'm not sure if I saw Dead Poet Society before Jurassic Park or after, but I think that had a big hand in it in terms of the premise of arts versus, the traditional way of studying. And it's such an incredible film at all levels, from performances to cinematography to music to direction. And late great Robin Williams of Oh
yeah,
Captain, My Captain.
yeah. I think, yes, I agree totally. I think really that everybody who worked on it, from crew to talent, and even in post production, putting it all together, weren't affected by it. I think it's a very powerful comment, but beautifully realistic about it all. And I think over the years, it's almost one of the films that people keep relating to. And they say, "Oh, you did Dead Poets Society." And I said, I did a little bit. I tried to help my best, but it affected them. And I love it for that. And I think that, Peter's interpretation of Tom Schulman's fantastic writing in the beginning, um, as you know, directors and always try to search the script that they've got, um, and search for uh, the way of doing it that's got lovely deep meanings that can extend whatever the written word is, visually or with sound or music. And we went through it, I remember, in pre-production, and the office going crazy because Peter was in such demand for a million questions. As you know, wardrobe, makeup, hair, locations, what are we going to do? And he'd say, no. He'd say, for this week, from 8 a.m. to 12 midday, Johnny and I are going to go through the script. And we read it and read it and read it. And any thoughts, Peter is, as you know, is like that. He searches everybody's brain, not just the actors, but technicians and everybody who's involved in his film. In a way, he searches their brains for ideas, for thoughts, for little motivational ideas, inspirations that he might get. And for that whole week, which drove the office mad, we went through it. And in the end, it was a lovely thing where on the last day, he said, Tom Schulman's script's fantastic. Let's go shoot it. And we literally he didn't reassemble or rewrite anything. Later, of course, working with the actors, as always, there were some lovely inputs from the actors, which were readily accepted by Peter, as always. And some of them we reshot quickly. Um, and so that, I think, was a lovely, lovely compliment to Tom Schulman for his wonderful writing and original concept of a script, to Peter's ability to absorb all of the ideas from there, maintain that balance of writing, and with the actors then mature it into the film that it ended up being. So I think it's lovely compliments all round, really.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you worked back to back on two of the most inspiring and meaningful and obviously successful films critically and commercially, Dead Poet Society, and the year before that, Rain Man. Um, right? Am I correct in assuming that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And having those two films, not that they're similar, but in terms of just, the story, and they were both up for Oscars, like a lot of Oscars. I don't know if they won. I'm sure they did win some, but I don't know which one. It's been a while since I've sort of kept track of that. But having to work on things like that, the meaningful projects, not that the other ones are not, but such depth to it. Like English poetry, like William Wordsworth, John Keats. I mean, I remember I was in grade 11 or 12 English at the time when I probably saw it, and that's when I was learning about all these great poets as well. Did you, as a cinematographer, were you familiar with their work, or if not, did you study their work just to understand the storytelling from this perspective of a cinematographer?
Very interesting question. I always found in the earlier days working with Peter in the Australian renaissance of film as it came back into Australia, we started making films. The ones that I was involved with mainly as a camera operator in those earlier days, um, maybe it's because of that I grew to love watching actors strut their stuff. I loved listening to the director discussing the moment for that shot within that entire screenplay, how it fitted in, and the modulation of it. I loved listening to all that. I don't know why. I never wanted to be an actor, and I'm terrified of being in front of cameras actually. But I loved watching and analysing, well, not analysing, but listening to the director's instructions to an actor who then would interpret that. And as the camera operator, I felt that I was in there knowing and hoping I'm realising as much of the emotion the director wants out of the actor, I felt should come out of the camera. And I grew to love that. And I was so fortunate through my life to actually end up working with some of the great actors of that whole era, um, and being able to watch them strut their stuff. And I hope that what I learnt from that was that I could help a little bit in some way or form. And when I became a lighting cameraman, I shifted across finally and became lighting. I couldn't give up operating. I had to keep operating. It caused a bit of a stir internationally because some countries, particularly America at that time, didn't accept the director of photography doing their own operating. There were unions involved and whatnot. And we ran into that trouble on Dead Poet Society. So by selection of scripts or that I was offered, came down to choosing a script like Rain Man, Dustin Hoffman. Who wouldn't go to work with him and watch him
Mm.
strut his stuff? Who wouldn't do that? But so I did that film, and I loved doing that. I think two actors interpreting the written screenplay and bringing it to life as two characters. I remember Dustin saying to me a week before he used to hover around the office all the time. And I said, you don't have to be here, Dustin. You go home and play tennis or talk to your agent or something. And he'd say, no, I love it. I love all this bullshit that you people talk in pre-production. I love listening to that. And I thought, isn't that funny? Because I love watching the actors strut their stuff. And so there was, so after that, we did that film, and I loved watching those two top actors just getting together and making the film, and watching, the whole thing develop. Then to be asked to do Dead Poets was no issue in that. I mean, Peter Weir, and doing a film, any film with Peter was you always said yes. So I did that, and it again was a lovely example of a beautifully written script, interpreted by Peter and honed by it with the actors, to create the film that was created. So I think it's basically, the answer to that is I love it watching the relationship of actors to directors, say, to a written script, and how they interpret that and how they present that in front of the cameras. And maybe I hope I helped in some way with the camera, in various technical ways, maybe. I know that Dead Poets, we shot it very quickly. We did a lot of, I was on one camera then too, which even though in Rain Man I found multiple cameras, somehow Dead Poets was a single camera coverage. To do that, we had to move very quickly, and I was operating. The film was very funny. The film before with Peter, we had to use an operator. And to be honest, that upset Peter immensely, because I had been operating for Peter in Australia with the great Russell Boyd as DP. And we got on well there, and he was asking me to light, and I couldn't operate. And so with Dead Poets Society, we found a camera operator in the area that had a broken leg and he couldn't work. So we booked him up, and the union agreed, and we booked him up. And because he wasn't getting work and he was a bit tight, we offered to take him on, and left him in the wheelchair, and I did the operating. So we got round the union back then, in
That
that.
is awesome.
Yeah, so I was able to operate for Peter. So the combination, I think, of lighting and operating, I always found was an incredible help in a way to actors, that I was close enough, because I was the operator to them, to be able to talk to them as a technician in a way, and as the lighting cameraman, I could help them there. And I found that going as fast as possible helped everybody, obviously, shooting as fast as possible. And it certainly, I think, helped actors stay in character. It was one of the main things I found through life that they often mentioned at the end, was that they loved the speed because it kept them in character. And I think with those boys, most of them were reasonably inexperienced when they started.
Mm.
And here was this amazing director, who took them in and made them comfortable, and made them feel that, really it's not a movie we're shooting. We're just recording a lifetime of these boys, a life of these boys in that school community. And he kept them very comfortable. And I hope that by lighting and operating and being aware of actors' problems in front of a camera, maybe by not being too experienced, or the clapperboard upsetting them, things like that, that I could help keep it as comfortable as possible, was always up front with me and with the crew. I'd always try and say to the crew, no noise. If we're lighting, don't want any noise or yelling. Just, I'll quietly tell you what I want, and then, please go off and do it as quietly as you can. Keep the actors in the realm of the reality of the set, which is representing the script, because to take them out of that and create this noisy lighting film set feel, often mentally could take them out of their mode of character. And I didn't want that. I wanted them to, try and help them stay in character and help them stay in a high performance zone that Peter was getting from them, as much as possible, by reducing the impact of filmmaking process. So I think all of that was basically from the early days of just loving watching actors go from a that person in reality to this character, and realizing that we can help a lot.
Yeah. I think it was Quentin Tarantino, and I could be wrong, who I heard saying that when your actors come on the set the first time, do not tell them what to do because they may bring something that you may not have seen or even thought about. And after that, you can tell them what to do, if that's something that you still want. Because actors, just like anybody else, like, a cinematographer or a set designer or costume designer, they will have their perspective and they will want to bring that in. And it's good to hear that because you just never know what they might bring to the table as opposed to you telling them all the time what to do.
Yeah. And it was interesting that last week going through the DVD and excerpts of the actors talking, and the boys did have a lot of that, and their contribution uh, to the film by becoming the character and being, as one said, bold enough to say, "I wouldn't say that," is a very
Yeah,
major thing to say to a director. And I think that Peter's wonderful approach to them as performers, um, and keeping them as comfortable as possible enable them to be able to say, I don't think I'd say that. I'd rather not say it, or whatever they approach they had to Peter. Uh, you know, even to an actor, say the father, saying, I wasn't happy with the approach that I gave the performance yesterday. So Peter said, no problem, let's reshoot it. And so
oh wow.
we quickly reshot it. So as a cameraman, I felt that the essence of speed is there to say, well, you want to reshoot that scene? That was from yesterday. Okay, we had that, we had that, we had that. And go to the gaffer and say quietly, remember the scene yesterday we did? We're doing it again. What for? What for? I said, don't worry about, well, why? No, we're doing it again right now. Backlight up there, remember, a little soft fill, whatever, whatever. The brain was still active. So that was able to be put together very quickly. So once again, I always hoped that the speed would keep the actor in the performance that they wanted to present. And I think in films like Rain Man, like Dead Poets Society, um, those lovely films that are where performance counts heavily rather than action or, some sort of form of escape
Right.
imagery that doesn't, that lovely sheer good words, good performance, um, to make a good film is wonderful to help make.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that everything was on a go, go, go style, like, very, very quick. So the actors stayed in their characters. And 2 points. One being that even I have found, or anybody else that I've talked to, like when you are limited with resources, and I think you and I have talked about it too, or when you're doing things quick, you don't second guess yourself, right? Like you may make mistakes here and there, but you're just on that speedboat and you're going, going, going. But what's interesting, the fact that you said that the film was shot in such a poetic way because it was a poetic film, and with very mellow push-ins and pull-outs and the three shots that come to my mind when I think of Dead Poet Society or three scenes was Seize the Day and the way that was shot, with the students looking in to this all the photographs and Robin Williams leaning in and then obviously Captain Oh My Captain at the end and then the poetry scene where I'm assuming with a steady cam where it goes around Ethan Hawke and the timing of that and the synergy of that and the cuts of that was just so beautiful to watch. And sometimes when you're watching a camera going really, really fast, you're like, "Oh, that's cool." But because the words in the script were so powerful that remained the prominent thing as opposed to the shot overtaking the
Yeah,
actual script.
yeah, yeah. Peter was very on that film was very much in a way shooting on the balls of his feet. He was very often, we were shooting so fast, he warned me in pre-production. He said, Johnny, I know we're not slow, you know, from Australian training where we had low budgets, short schedules, we had to finish films in that time. There was no money to go over. So it was sort of instilled in us both, actually, to maintain the schedule and still make the film that Peter wanted to make. And he said, I know we're not slow, but he said, I have to go very quickly. If I remember, he said, I've got 8 stories to tell. I've got 7 boys and a girl. And I need, in the editing room, to have the material to play with that. And so I have to get the material. I said, Peter, let's go. And I think it was 21 and a half setups a day average on a single camera. And all of that
Wow.
was within the normal time. We didn't go into
Yeah.
overtime, if I remember too much. But a lot of it was in situ, a phone call on Christmas Day, I think it was. We're all still camped down in Delaware and shooting over Christmas. It all stayed there. A phone call, I think it was Christmas Day or something. Johnny, what about the crew? It's snowing. And I said, it is, Peter. I think we'll be right. I'll ring around. And I quickly rang them all. And of course, they're all huddled around their fire. But they all agreed, let's go make the movie. And they were all out there in the middle of the Christmas break. And we shot the movie because it snowed. And it was that sort of lovely camaraderie we had with all the crew. Let's go make this movie, and with the actors. To me, that's a very, very lovely way to make movies. And somehow,
Yeah.
as you have said, Joed, that that energy of speed keeps the juices running for actors, directors. Like, try that, do this. What about it? What if? You know, and that's all, I think, a lovely part and parcel of making those kind of films. Dropping dialogue. If an actor says, I'm having trouble with that line, and I remember Peter would say, well, don't say it. Find something else. Keep
Hmm.
going without it. And giving them that chance, because, you know, it can go into the editing room and it can be used or it can be cut out. It's you've got to have the material to be able to play, for an editor to be able to play with the emotions of that of the film, really.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you guys decided to go out and shoot in snow because that's, in the context of the film, it was such a just a, like a opposite and juxtaposition of what was going on. It looked visually beautiful, but with the scene that was taking place was completely different. And it really, really worked very, very magically.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that that the boys queried it, maybe, like, but it's in the bathroom. But no, wouldn't you go out into the snow? And I suppose I might. Let's go, you know. And we did do 3 or 4 takes. We did lose the snow. And I quickly got the boys to check the weather forecast, and they said snow clearing in our area. And I said to Peter, the snow's going to clear. And he said, quick, let's go. Let's try and get it before it stops. And it did stop. And I forget how it went now, but I think we had the special effects boys had snow available in their truck or something, but they'd taken off for another location, something like that.
Mm.
And we had to ring them and say, get back, bring the snow back. And we put fake snow in to finish the scene, something like that. But all of that still worked and still made the film. So all of that makes it very exciting for us.
Yeah. Was the final scene, "Oh Captain, My Captain," was that filmed in the beginning, middle, or the end of the production schedule?
It was
Do you
filmed at the
remember?
end, uh,
Okay.
but the positions of the boys on the table standing was established in pre-production. We spent
Okay.
quite a lot of time, half a day, deciding where they were when they were standing on the table so the camera could place them and see them placed conveniently amongst each other to suit the dialogue or the timing of who was going to stand and who wasn't. Framing for Dylan, who didn't stand, made the decision through legs so that there was a feeling that the others are there. We found, and then that gave us basically the position of the boys in the classroom, so that when they sat down, that was their position in the classroom, so that the continuity would, for the final shot, would be
Yeah.
cemented and it wouldn't cause any problems. So all of that was worked out in pre-production. The film unraveled the performances and the emotion so that by the end of the film, the boys knew the whole story. So to stand at Captain, My Captain was a done deal as to positions and emotion. And the only thing we did do on Ethan Hawke and the other boys was to cheat the cross light a little bit so that there was light and shade on his face. So there was the quandary in represented in light, of the brightness of one side and the other side of darkness, of is he doing the right thing? Am I correct? Am I wrong? So there was a little visual comparison there as well.
Yeah. It's interesting you talk about that scene, the way you shot that scene, the final scene, Captain, Oh My Captain, because when you're looking at from the perspective of the Professor John Williams character, Mr. Keats, I've seen that I've watched that scene so many times trying to understand how the heck did you guys put everybody together and making sure that everybody else is coming in the shot accordingly. So now it makes so much sense that it was done in pre-production because to be able to organize all that
Yeah.
is not something that you can possibly do on the day of or, on the during the production at least.
No, I fully agreed, and I think that's where, with Peter and my training from Australia, you shoot as much in your mind in pre-production as you can, so that when you've got cameras rolling, you've got all those people involved, a lot of money, but also the time. I mean, to try and work that out on set would have meant that the seating in the room, wherever they, if you hadn't started from the end and worked back, it would have meant that there'd be confusion at the end as to where
Yeah,
people,
of
and
course.
you'd have to compromise maybe.
Yeah,
Whereas being able to think, for Peter to say, I'm going to work that out in pre-production, and then that'll cement where they sit during the
yeah,
whole classroom. Then we'll make the classroom work around that seating arrangement. And that's why the final scene is the power. And that's where the
yeah.
power of the film is, really.
Yeah, and I said Mr. Keats. It's actually Mr. Keating. But the reason I asked you the question about Captain, Oh My Captain, where it was shot in terms of the production schedule, because it is such a powerful scene. It's one of those scenes that you can just watch on its own, and you will still get it. Like it will hit you at, to the deepest core. As the crew was filming this, as they filmed the entire film from the beginning to end or relatively to the end. Was that scene impactful in terms of the story arc and just the whole performances on yourself, on the crew, the meaning and the power of that scene?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I've worked with Peter in Australia as camera operator on Gallipoli, and he always plays music, and it'll be a music chosen for that scene. And in asking him 100 years ago, why the music, he said it gives the actors the pace of the scene that I need, the pace, how fast or slow they should play. And Harrison Ford on Witness loved it, because it did exactly that. He would play it very loudly, right up until roll cameras, clapperboard would go on, and just before action, he'd turn it off and leave it ringing in the actors' ears, the pace, the music. And so he had that with the boys the whole time. And so whilst we were watching dailies, he would play the same music in the dailies theatre. And I don't know, on Gallipoli, I saw the whole shooting team practically in tears as the boys went over the bunker and getting shot to pieces. Crew in tears. At one stage, I had this lovely gaffer from Los Angeles, Norm, and Norm was a seasoned gaffer. You know, he was about the same age, but was an LA gaffer, and a lovely guy. Very excited. He did Rain Man and came across onto Dead Poets Society. And we were watching, I think it was that scene, and I'm thinking, yes, it was, because I remember when we lit Ethan heavily cross-lighting him, Norm was a little worried about how dark it was on the fill side. And I said, no, don't worry, Norm, don't worry. But the whole thing is the yin and the yang. It's the cross light that we need, and we need the contrast on it. Well, okay. And he got a little worried about it. But in the dailies, I'm sitting there watching it, and I looked at it and I thought, no, that's all right. That looks, and I turned around to Norm to say, Norm, that looks good. And he's in
Hmm.
tears. And I said, the music's playing, the boys are going up there. And I said, Norm, you're a seasoned Los Angeles gaffer. You're not allowed to cry. He's like, I can't help it. He said, look, I can't help it. So, yes, it's a very emotional time. And Peter created that with his music, which unashamedly was the mission that we were listening to. And I did hear later that Maurice Jarre had a heck of a time trying to find music that had the same power in the beat, because that was the timing for the boys to climb up, was that,
Yeah.
you know, the missions dum dum da da dum dum, and that was their climbing pace. And he had to make another piece of music, which he did beautifully.
Yeah, John, I mean, I miss those kind of movies, the music. I mean, even another film that came out around the same time, which you weren't involved in it. It was Scent of a Woman. Similar kind of approach that had like with Al Pacino and Chris O'Donnell, directed by Martin Brest, I think. But yeah, I mean, those kind of things, those kind of powerful scenes, which are just so simple, but they're executed so brilliantly that they make any, you know, visual effects movie, with hundreds of millions of dollars of budget going into the tank. Like it's just again, I mean, we can talk about this all the time, but there's just so beautifully done and craftily done. I mean, as you were talking about the music, literally, and that's how powerful Peter's choice was. I'm envisioning them climbing on the desk and the music building up, and Robin Williams' character, Mr. Keating, looking at the students, and the students have their hands in front of them. Like it's just such a visual scene. And, kudos to you to creating such a simple yet powerful imagery in that film.
And the wonderfully beautiful Robin Williams was always there on the set. Um, he didn't just wander off and go to his motorhome and ring his agent. He stayed on the set a lot, just watching and listening to how the boys were being directed and recorded, so that he was always part of the film, not just a sort of somebody who came and went to do their scenes. He was always there, very like Dustin Hoffman on Rain Man, who came into, pre-production and loved watching us all, trying to get it together. But they're the kind of actors that they're just so vibrant, and in a way that's why I've really loved over the years doing films such as that I can get involved with wonderful actors. And it's like George Miller's Lorenzo's Oil, that's another with characters that are so deeply etched as characters, that to try and help them stay in that part, in the role, in the character, and
Yeah.
watching them is just amazing.
Yeah, it's so true. And what's interesting is, I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. So Robin Williams had come into a lot of films before Dead Poet Society, but those are all the films aside from Good Morning Vietnam, which I think came out in 1987. Like most of us haven't heard of the other films, so that was like a comedic role. Then his next major was Dead Poet Society. To go from that to this. Then I think he did Awakenings, and after that, Mrs. Doubtfire, Aladdin. Like to have that kind of skill set where you can go from crazy lunatic physical comedy and the jokes to something so deep and profound, which unfortunately kind of came across in his passing almost 10 years ago now. What was working like with Robin Williams? In terms of on the set, was he ever comical? Like, was he when the things were not, the cameras were not rolling, was he doing his comic routine in any way?
He was. He just had to make people laugh. He loved people laughing, and he would suddenly start into something, and it'd be something nothing, but it would be hilarious. And Peter used to sit there, and I remember he used to laugh along with him, and he'd give him 8.5 minutes, and then Peter would quietly say, "Thank you, Robin, but we need to get back to work." And Robin would be, "Yes, yes, sir, yes, sir, sorry, sir, yes, sir." And he'd go and sit in the corner and listen and watch while we recorded then the scenes that we were there for. Um, so I think for any director, maybe he was a bit of a handful. And as you could see in the film, Peter let him go with the little anecdote from John Wayne about the sword, and mimicking John Wayne so brilliantly. I mean, he let him go on that, and he put it in the film, and just gave it a little touch of the Robin Williams brilliance of comedy, of humour, and put it in the film as though that character did have a lovely sense of humour underneath this wonderful ability to get the best out of the boys and the best out of life. But still had a lovely sense of humour without letting it go to the point where it was just another Robin Williams film. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It was a Keating film, and he was Keating. He just had possibly a nice sense of humour.
Yeah, and it's so sad that when he passed away, I saw Dead Poet Society again, and then I saw the last scene over and over again. And obviously, you start thinking about things in a different way once a certain event happens. That last scene or one of the last shots where he's just looking up at the boys with his, calmness and his smile, but there was this deep sorrow inside that you could see
Yeah,
through his eyes.
yeah.
And I just felt, and again, like, because of what happened, you're sort of inclined to think like that. I wonder if he was going through something at that time, even though that was like, 24, 5 years ago, because you could see something in his eyes, and whether that was acting, which I'm sure it was, but just something else was there. And I've seen that in all of his performances. You look at Mrs. Doubtfire, you look at what was that movie, Good Will Hunting, whole lots of stuff.
Very possibly. I mean, I believe from what I read and heard was that he had ups and downs. So through his life. So maybe, yes, maybe possibly there's something in there. And maybe too, it gave him the depth of that emotion at that moment, to be able to draw on, sadly.
Yeah. And it's incredible to see Ethan Hawke have his career and now his daughter. I don't know if you've seen his daughter's performance in I don't know which season it was that she came in Stranger Things season 3, I think, or 2. But yeah, she's as talented as him in terms of doing what she does and following her dad's footstep.
Oh, great.
Because he was fabulous in that movie. Ethan Hawke was just absolutely fabulous in Dead Poet Society.
It was very interesting. The boys were very interesting. I know too that the youngest one, I think Dylan, was 17, and I think Gail was 29. So there's a heck of an age difference between all the boys. But Peter's method of pre-production and getting them down into Delaware early, 2 weeks early, and putting them together as though they had been in school together for a couple of years rather than just gathering to make a movie, paid dividends all the way, that they knew each other. They started to sort each other out. And I think that's all a wonderful part of Peter's ability as a director, incredible ability as a director to be able to understand human nature. And that's not only with the actors, it's with the crew as well, that he had a wonderful understanding on how to get the best out of them in a way, which
Yeah,
was quite a privilege to be able to be asked to work and help him make films.
yeah. To wrap things up, John, the film ended up winning, I think, according to Google at least, maybe you obviously know better, Best Director, Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Original Screenplay, and rightfully so. Um, do you remember the first time, whether it was through a screening, if they had test screenings at the time, or even if it was just a premiere or a public screening, where you saw the film and you obviously feeling the way you did, most likely very emotional, but you heard the gasps or the laughs around you by people. Do you remember that experience?
Or not really, Joe. It's a long time ago.
Okay.
And I
Mm,
got involved
mhm.
in it, obviously, in post-production to do the grade, the release print grade. One of the lovely things about the movie too is that it was on film, and it was a time when you, as the director of photography, you were um, all the way to the end, all the way to the theatre that was screening it. Um, it was your photography that was involved with it, and I think that was, to me, it was a lovely era of working with Peter, working with wonderful actors, young and old, working very close with those actors uh, as a director of photography and the camera operator, watching them through the camera, and a lot of things happened over the years, not with Peter, but when you're watching actors through a camera, you're actually watching, as a mentor of mine in the very early days told me, you're actually watching a movie. Through that viewfinder with a blackout and just a little image at the end, that's a screen, and it's a movie screen, and you're actually watching the performances. And there's a lot of things I felt that uh, were gained back then because of that have been
Mm,
a little lost now because of possibly the new digital revolution has got a blanketing of everybody's watching it, and on little screens all over the film sets, and It's a different era. It's a very fascinating era, I've got to say, but it's one that I'm bailing out of at this stage. And I suppose my reminiscing is that they were great days. I mean, Peter wasn't watching a monitor on Dead Poets. Peter would often be standing where the next shot
Mm,
would be, and he would because we did take one and print so many times um, that you had to have a damn good reason to want another take because of the speed. We had to keep the speed up and move on to the next
yeah,
shot. And I would be with Norm, the gaffer, I would be pre-lighting the reverse while we were fussing there. The boys would be quietly putting things in there, ready to quickly turn the camera around and try and get the reverse in 4 minutes so that the actors all stayed on set, stayed in character, stayed in performance. And that speed was all part and parcel of being able to be in control, really, of the total imaging of the film. And it's an era that's gone in a way because so many people now can step up and say, wait a minute, there's a problem in the background there, we've got to go again, or
yeah,
this or that. And I think as the operator, I learned very early in the piece to listen to the way the director said cut. And if it was a nice sort of a lovely cut, I knew they probably had the performance. Then I had to analyse a little bump in the middle or this or that, little problem there. And oh gosh, that didn't work too well. But director got the performance. So then I would say, okay, great. I'd say, and then he'd say, how was it for you? Because they always went to the operator. How was it for you? And I'd have to say, great, it's fantastic, with as much enthusiasm as they'd said cut. But if their enthusiasm in cut wasn't there, I'd find a
yeah.
problem to help them along, maybe. And things like that, I thought were a very satisfying way of being a cameraman. But I've found on films now in the digital revolution, that satisfaction's not quite there anymore.
And I think that also is with some exceptions, is shown in the performance because when the director is right there with the camera operator or DP and the actors are right there as well, there is that level of trust and that level of, okay, this director wants, cares about me and wants the best performance out there out of me. And then there's also, for the lack of a better word, a slight fear that he's right there or she's right there. I need to be on my top of my game as opposed to he or she is sitting in another room with a monitor. So it creates that pressure, but the pressure brings out the best performance as well.
Well, a lovely recent example was with the beautiful Tilda Swinton with George Miller's 3,000 Years of Longing. And about 2 weeks in, because of the digital world now means that the cameraman goes off to the DIT tent and
Yeah,
you literally light on the DIT monitors, which are all calibrated and whatnot. So you're not on set. And about 2 weeks in, I came back onto the set and Tilda looked at me and she said, where have you been? And I thought, I'm in trouble. Yeah, I'm in trouble. And I said, well, Tilda, I've been up in the DIT tent. She said, what's a DIT tent? She didn't have a clue what a DIT tent was. I said, it's the Digital Intermediate Technicians tent. We're looking after you there. I started to talk very quickly. I said, we're looking after you there. We've got very large, very highly calibrated monitors, and we're checking color and things. We're looking after you up there. I kept saying, we're looking after you. We're looking after you. And she said, well, that's not what I'm used to. I like it when the director of photography is standing beside the camera. And I thought, ding, there you go. That's all big part of an actor's security, is to have the
yeah.
cameraman staring at them, watching every little bit of light or everything that's happening to them. And so after that, I didn't go up to the tent. I said, you're on your own. You're on your own. He said, but I need your input. I said, you're not going to get it. We'll do it in post. Don't worry. Don't worry. So
It's a sense of validation, right?
yeah, yeah. And I thought that that is a little sad bit that we've lost out of the filmmaking process, as we just talked, from the photochemical process, where the director was there beside the camera, the director of photography was there, the operator, if they had one, was all there staring at them and looking after them, basically. And now they're not there. The director's 30 feet away in a blacked out little tent watching a monitor, and cameraman's in the dit tent. There's nobody there of sort of they might feel is security. So I worry about that a little. No, I don't worry about it, but I just feel it's a loss at this stage.
And I think it's gone one step beyond that now with AI coming into play. And imagine what that would, I mean, it already is, but imagine what that would do in 5, 10 years when people will cherish the way they made films in the early 2000s, in the mid 2000s.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's interesting times, but nevertheless, thank you so much, John, for your time. Lovely talking to you as usual. Thank you
Joe, at
for all
any
the
time,
insight on this
any
work.
time, any film, any time.
Perfect. We'll be in touch for sure. Thank you for your time. You have yourself a great day, a great weekend coming up for you.
You too. Cheers.
Cheers. Take care. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment. And do come back for another episode. Until then, have a great day.